Okay, moving on to the visual aspect and the PowerPoint aspect of this. That's an example of a 3-minute thesis slide by Rosemary Boland, who was a University of Melbourne entrant in the 3MT. Very impactful slide, and they don't always have to look like this, but I'm sure you'll agree it's quickly accessible. It supports what she said because it was about premature birth, and that's what the image is about, and it's high interest, high impact. Again, you don't always have to go for high impact, but sometimes it could be appropriate. Some design considerations about the visual aspect, the PowerPoint. Now, these are just guides, okay? One of the first rules, though, you'll find in any bit of online advice or some advice on presentations and presenting using visuals and PowerPoint is don't overpopulate the slides. So, you know, minimal key text, not sentences, not paragraphs, minimal text. This is an oral context, not necessarily a reading one. This is just to support you. So I always go for between 5 and 8 points per slide. If there's detail, I'll give out some handouts if I need to. Slides to time ratio is a very common question. My general answer is, rule of thumb, don't have more slides than minutes. So if it's a 20-minute presentation, your rule of thumb is 20 slides. Of course, there's going to be exceptions to this rule. If you're doing an art presentation with 20 slides of pictures with some textual slides backing it up, you might go over that. But generally speaking, shouldn't have more slides than minutes. And as a transition aid and a presenter's aid, get one of these. If you're going to be presenting regularly, it's a slide advancer, and it frees you up from staying near the keyboard. Some other considerations, 18 to 32 point text generally for this size here, for this in-text font here, and for the headings, 36 to 40 point print. Tend towards sans serif fonts. They're the fonts without the little hook bit, like Times New Roman. So go for things like Arial and Calibri. They're a bit easier to read. Contrast text to background. I find black on white is simple, but it's very effective and probably the best. You don't need to use the PowerPoint templates. I don't. I just start blank. Wipe the template, start blank. If you have to use a departmental template, that's one thing. If you don't, you can consider generating your own. But my advice on these slides, keep it simple. Clean and simple is best. Animations. I tend to use wipe animations. That animation there is a wipe animation. It's very simple, effective, clean. Don't use the crazy, what I call the crazy animations, the twirly gigs, the diamond, the parachute. They're too busy, and I think it's easier and more effective to use a simple wipe one. When looking at pictures, what I call a drop shadow just tends to lift the picture off the page. You can emphasize or highlight with transparent boxes. So rather than using the laser, and most of these things have a laser, or underlining, which tends to make the text a bit more busy, think of things like simple shaded boxes. To format any picture or shape, you just need to double click on it or right click it. It's very simple in PowerPoint. This PowerPoint display and the menu will depend on the version you're using, but generally they're all fairly much the same in terms of the menu they have above. That inserting that type of shape is in the Insert Shapes menu. You've got a lot of shapes to choose from. Something like this is just simply a square, okay? You drop it in and you can format the color and the transparency. You can make it semi-transparent so you can overlay it on text, which is a nice feature. So insert, shapes, and that format is the right click. You right click your picture or image to bring it out. The animations is in the animations tab. The wipe animations there, you don't have to use that. It's the one I prefer. And that numbering, when it comes up, will give you your order of entry of text animation or picture animation, image animation, box shape, anything on the page. If you can use Microsoft Word, I'm hoping you're understanding this by now. If you can use MS Word, you can use PowerPoint. It's very simple. Okay, so complex images. Sometimes you need to use complex images. This was not an image I'd prefer to use, but I'm using this as an example that if you get something as complicated as this, a data set, for example, to show, you probably wouldn't start there. It's too much information. Think of the multiple audio sensory input that Susan Weinshank talks about. Reduce and keep it simple. So you might start with that. Talk about that for a couple of minutes. Move on. Talk about that part. Move to the next slide. Talk about that. And finally, end up with this however many minutes later. You'll probably agree that starting with that is much more effective, I think, or easy for the audience to deal with than starting with that. Okay? Similarly, again, I'm thinking of university students who sometimes have complicated data sets to produce and talk about and show to an audience. If you've got that and you wanted to emphasize part of it, you can de-emphasize. Now, you've probably worked out already, these are just shaded boxes. Okay, so I've used the Insert Shapes menu, a grey box, right-click, format, make it semi-transparent, and then you animate it to come in. Okay, you can also emphasize. Now, again, you look at this, and that is clearly more emphatic and easier to read than what it was 3 animations ago. Simple. Okay, graphs, same thing. You don't have to show the whole data set at the same time or at once. You can bring it in, talk your way through it at the pace you need to. You can even bring them in varied ways if you want to. Now, this kind of looks like it's difficult. It's not. They are just shapes. They're animated in. If you want them to come in at the same time, what you do is you just click on one, hold down the Shift key, click on the others, then you can animate them in together. Okay, we're coming to the end of this. We'll look at some don'ts, then some do's, so we end on a positive note. Some things to avoid. Avoid clip art and stick figures. They have a place, but I don't think it's in presentations. I tend to go where I can for real photos. Acknowledge them, just say where you got them from. Things like Wiki Commons, there's plenty of free banks of photographs online if you haven't got your own. Don't go with slide borders, and you don't need a picture of yourself. The audience can see you, they know who you are. Don't use crazy animations, as we've talked about. Don't lose eye contact with the audience. Just for the purpose of this presentation, I've looked back and forward a fair few times, but try to keep your focus this way, on the audience, engaging with them. Try to be as front on as you can. Don't overpopulate slides, I've talked about that. You don't need a thank you slide. Quite often, oral presentations from PhD candidates, conference presentations, no matter what the situation, have a thank you slide. You don't need it. Avoid font mixing and avoid fancy fonts. Don't use Comic Sans, it's a terrible font. Keep them simple. Okay. Some takeaway messages: sequence and separation. Okay. Talk to time. So fit your talk to the time you have, and that means reduce content if you need to. That's the reduction point. Reduce. Okay. That applies to what you say. Keep the important bits prominent, and it applies to the visuals as well. Large text size. Keep it simple, not too much information, so KISS, not TMI. Look positive, look happy, and have a clear focus message, okay? So what I'm recommending you to do is to go away, go back to your computers, and try some of this, okay? Stay on our website, Academic Skills, for more fantastic strategies and tips, workshops, and ways that we can assist you academically. Thank you.